more on this, I'm joined in studio by Arod, Balissa, a manager at Deloitte Catalyst. Arod, thank you so much for joining us. Now, what are some of the steps that companies and the big corporations can do in order to tackle climate change?
Well, it turns out that there is quite a lot that businesses can do. And I think our global CEO, Puneet Ranjan, has weighed in on the issue in an op-ed last week, just as the IPCC report has been published. And he categorized business action into 4 categories. The first one is to reduce their own emissions. So that has to do anything with making sure supply chains are carbon neutral, making sure that waste is being managed. It is making sure that they reduce their carbon footprint as much as possible. The second thing that they can do is disclose data about their impact. And in what is now commonly referred to as ESG, environmental, social, and governance reporting, organizations can provide more accurate and more granular data, and that would help the global financial system to put an accurate price tag on doing business, what the cost of doing business is. Third, it's about educating employees. And educating employees means to be able to take huge workforces and helping them become more climate conscious and making sure that climate change is top of mind for them. And we as Deloitte are the first company to deploy a learning module, learning program for its entire 330,000 people workforce. The fourth thing is calling on governments to be bolder and to do more to stave off the worst impacts of climate change.
Tell me a little bit more, just briefly, tell me a little bit more about Deloitte's program, because you just mentioned it there, that Deloitte is actually doing something now to tackle climate change. What is that? Well,
Deloitte is doing a couple of things. And it's really important to remember that this is a key priority from the top, from our global CEO and downwards to the what we call member firms. And what we're doing can be divided into 3 parts. So the first is what's called World Climate, which is our own internal program to reduce our carbon footprint and to make sure that we are carbon neutral by 2030. That means changing our supply chains, working with vendors to make sure that we reduce our global footprint, reducing air travel, and just about any kind of step you can think of. And I can give you an example. We have now deployed a green team in each one of our member firms. There's one in almost every country. I'm proud to be a member of our own green team here in Israel. And these teams are responsible for doing just about anything that we can in order to make sure that we are carbon neutral. The second thing is the learning module I've mentioned, which is really remarkable in its scale and its ability to reach people all over the world and make them climate conscious and ensure that climate change is top of mind. And the third thing we do is, of course, partnerships. We work with all kinds of different organizations to make sure that we stand to the challenge and that we help others to stand to the challenge as well. And I'll give one example. And if we mention the learning module, then we have developed it in collaboration with the World Wildlife Foundation.
And Arod, a lot of companies have already committed to 100% renewable energy, especially in the tech sector, which we know is huge here in Israel. So what are we seeing here?
So indeed, a lot of companies have pledged carbon neutrality by 2050 and by 2030. And in Israel, we are only starting to see this trend of big companies making these pledges. Interestingly enough, what we do see is that the startup scene and the high-tech industry is taking the charge in mobilizing towards supporting achieving those goals. We've seen funding avenues coming from both VCs and from the government. We see new accelerators and programs to help climate-facing and climate-focusing companies to penetrate global markets. Companies in Israel, and I think the whole ecosystem is starting to understand that there's something big happening. There is a big business opportunity. And this is something we've seen before. We've seen with digital health, we've seen with the automotive industry, we've seen with cybersecurity. And so I think it's very encouraging that it is the Israeli innovators and the supporting functions of the ecosystem that are leading the charge here.
Well, it certainly is good news that businesses are now getting on board, and hopefully that all these plans do turn into action across the board here. Arod Balissa, manager at Deloitte Catalyst, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.